Well, welcome to this event from the Open Group today, and you're all very welcome. I think looking at the chat facility, we've clearly got a multitude of people from a multitude of locations from around the globe, and you're all very, very welcome. Today's webinar is being hosted by BizDesign. BizDesign is a very active member of the Open Group and have been sending out quite a few webinars in conjunction with the Open Group over the last few years. Today's speaker is Baz van Gils. Before I go to Baz, I'd just like to go over a few housekeeping issues to keep the event moving forward smoothly. First of all, we would encourage you to ask questions. The best way to submit a question during the event is to use the Q&A text facility. If you do write a question in there, could I ask you to address your question either to all or all participants? That one gets to see the questions that are being submitted. What we intend to do is we'll ask the questions at the end of the event. So if you submit your question, we will answer the questions at the end of the event. This event is also being recorded, so if for any reason you have to leave early or if you experience any local technical difficulties, a full recording of this event will be available tomorrow, and everyone registered will get an email with the URL you can access that recording. As if you're ready, can I ask you to start your presentation?
Okay, thank you, Simon. So on my behalf, welcome everybody to today's webinar on building a strong data management capability with TOGAF and ArchiMate. I'll quickly introduce myself and then off we go. We have a full agenda. As mentioned, my name is Bas van Gils and I work for BizDesign. I've been working for BizDesign for the last 5 years or so, with assignments both in the Netherlands and around the world. I hope to do some more traveling soon to test out some of the fresh ideas that we've developed with clients over the last few months. Here's my contact information. If you have any questions or suggestions or would like to get in touch about enterprise architecture, data management, or any related topic, don't hesitate to call or send an email. Or I'm also quite active on LinkedIn and on Twitter. So please get in touch if you have any questions or suggestions. Also, a quick note on a quick introduction of BizDesign. We're a global company with an integrated service offering with several service lines. Today we'll be talking mostly about the enterprise architecture management service line, but we also do quite a bit of business modeling, which aligns with strategic management in most organizations. Business process management, business rule management is being introduced as we speak, and we're very active in the world of business requirements management. Now, for each of these service lines, we have several types of offerings. Consulting, which is what I do most of my time. We've done some tooling for the enterprise architecture management capability. That would be ArchiMate as a language support.
To interrupt, Baz, could you speak up a little bit? You've got a bit quiet on us.
Okay. Is it better this way, Simon?
That's much better, thank you.
Okay. Sorry about that. Apparently, some issues with the microphone. As I was saying, consulting services, we also have tooling, and we do quite a bit of training, and we work off best practices. Usually for each of our service lines, we follow open standards such as TOGAF and ArchiMate whenever possible. Without further ado, let's dive into the meat of today's presentation. I've developed the following agenda. First of all, I'll say a few words about why data management matters. Some observations from assignments, some newspaper clippings, and some speaking engagements that I've had over the last few months. Then briefly set the scene by introducing TOGAF and ArchiMate. I know I have a large group of attendees today who are already familiar with either TOGAF, ArchiMate, or both. But I think we also have some newcomers to the field. So I'll very briefly introduce both, and we'll dive into how to use TOGAF and ArchiMate as instruments to build strong data management capability. I'll end with some tips for more information and reading and how to get in touch. I will also provide you with a link where you can download today's slides after the webinar is finished. So if you want a copy of the slides, you can download them from our website, and I'll provide you with the link at the end. Alright then, why data management matters. So let's start with a few questions. Right, all of these questions literally come from engagements that I've had over the last few months. Others are more inspired by things we see in the discussion fora online. So let's take a few examples. Right, organizations that I work with have trouble obtaining a single unified view of, for example, customers or products. One of my recent assignments that I'm still working on and trying to wrap up right now revolves around a unified view on the product side. This is often seen as an IT problem, saying, well, we have the information in the database. But we'll see shortly, it's not really an IT problem, it's a very much a business problem, because the business impact of not having the single unified view is huge. So it's business leadership that should steer you into the direction of actually obtaining such a unified view. Also, data quality, either for intelligence or for primary data stores, also a big issue that we see today, or handling customer complaints and figuring out what went where is also quite a frustration for many of us, especially if you do a lot of business online. So many of these questions many organizations face questions like this today. Do a bit of Googling and a bit of statistics. I did this a few months ago. I checked the validity, the numbers still add up to pretty much the same picture. On the horizontal axis, we have the number of searches according to Google for several topics, business rule management, EA, and so forth, and so on. And on the vertical axis, we have the amount of pages that are available about this topic. If you look at this, there's an interesting pattern. For example, on the top left corner, you see business rules management. We see a lot of pages about business rule management, but not so many searches yet. If you look at the trend, it's actually growing. It's becoming more and more popular, and I expect a lot from it over the next few months. But also, EA and management and strategic management are right there in the sweet spot. And this makes sense if you look at the current economic climate, right? With the current financial crisis or economic crisis, you expect strategic management to be very popular in terms of the amount of searches that you see. A lot is being written about it as well. But at the same time, we see also a big growth in popularity in data management, and not only from the technical side with things like NoSQL and big data, so especially about business analytics and the impact of having...
Sorry, it's Simon again. Sorry to interrupt again. Can you just move the microphone a little bit away from your mouth, Baz?
Okay.
A little bit of feedback there.
It's like we have a tender balance between volume and feedback. Is it better?
Yeah.
Okay. Keep going, and if it's grading again, please give me another poke.
Okay, sorry about that.
No worries. The same conclusion can be drawn if you look at what other people are saying. For example, here we have a quote by Jill Shea from SAS, made at a recent RM UK MDM conference. She says that a company's ability to use information strategically is directly correlated to the degree to which data is managed and governed. This is absolutely in line with what we see if you look at the amount of pages that are available online and the popularity of certain search words. Also, if you look at what people are struggling with in organizations, then this is the conclusion that you can draw. And indeed, some of the headlines from news sites over the last few months. And what strikes me is that organizations finally start to see data management or information management as a business problem rather than seeing solely as an IT problem. So I think the case for getting your hands dirty with data management. Let's very briefly do an introduction of TOGAF and ArchiMate. So it's just a high-level overview for those of you who are not familiar with those standards just yet. Here a definition of enterprise architecture as a concept. Right? It's a conceptual tool that helps organizations to get a deeper understanding of the organization in general, and especially with respect to the question, how are we organized, how should we be organized, and how should we get from where we are to where we want to be. Right? As such, it provides us with a route planner for business and technology change. So this integrated perspective on the enterprise is key for being successful with EA. If you look at the ingredients of enterprise architecture frameworks, then you also see those aspects reappear. On the one hand, if you want to be successful with an enterprise architecture approach to any business issue, you need both a process and a language. And the two standards that we use today, TOGAF and ArchiMate, are very complementary in that sense. TOGAF focuses mostly on the process part of the framework, where ArchiMate focuses mainly on the language part of the EA framework. Both standards are being maintained by the open group. This is a good thing because it makes sure that both standards continue to stay aligned very nicely. Look at TOGAF first. Here we see the 6 main components from TOGAF. And on the top left, or the architecture development method, is the main part behind TOGAF. I'll talk about it in a little bit more detail in a minute, but this is the process that guides you in doing EA in practice. It helps you to get from where you are to where you want to be. It's a very generic approach to doing EA, suitable for a wide range of organizations. You should be able to tailor it to the specific needs of your organization. For example, to implement a strong data management capability. This is where the ADM guidelines and techniques at the bottom left comes in. About that in a little bit more detail as well. Since the EA is a phased approach, each of the phases you produce architecture artifacts, and preferably you use a structured language. And this is where the ACF, or Architecture Content Framework, comes in. And this is also where it aligns nicely with ArchiMate. The other 3 aspects I won't cover in so much detail. They're the use of reference models, something that we see a lot in the field of data management. The enterprise continue as a virtual repository for all your artifacts. And last but not least, the architecture capability framework, which says something about the architecture capability, the people, tools, and processes that you have in place to do EA in your organization. If you want a little bit more, there are several excellent webinars, recorded webinars on the website of the Open Group as well as on the website of BizDesign. So if you want to know more about TOGAF, please have a look there. Let's look briefly at the ADM then. Here we see the main graphic. We said it's a phased approach, and the fact that it's drawn in a circular manner also suggests that it's iterative and incremental. And I'll quickly talk you through how this process works. If you follow the ADM for doing architecture, you start at the top with a preliminary phase, and this phase is all about preparing the organization for doing architecture work. So set standards about how you do EA, agreeing on templates, agreeing on tools, agreeing on modeling languages, all that sort of stuff is part of the preliminary phase. Then you get into doing the actual architecture work, which always starts with a vision. It's a business vision. It's a level aspirational view of what it is that we want to achieve. And in our case, this could be, we want to build an industry-grade data management capability with the following goals. Right? It tells you where you want to be. Phases B, C, and D around business architecture, information systems architecture, and technology architecture. You figure out in more detail where we are and where we want to be with respect to this business vision. So this is where you flesh out the baseline architecture and the technology architecture. In our case, this is where we model or figure out where are we with respect to data management currently, and what will the situation look like. On opportunities and solutions, we perform a gap analysis between baseline and target, and we figure out the optimal way of going from where we are to where we want to be. Whereas in phase F, migration planning, we talk about the best implementation strategy and align with project management or program management if necessary. Then phase G, we actually govern the implementation, in our case of the data management capability from an architecture perspective, making sure that all concerns of various stakeholders are addressed. And last but not least, once the capability is implemented, in phase H, we make sure that it continues to deliver what we wanted it to deliver when we started out. If that doesn't happen, then the cycle starts over and over again, and this is where the iterative and incremental aspect of it comes in. There's a lot more to be said about it, but I think this is enough for now. It gives you a bit of a feeling on how it works, right? You develop a high-level vision, you figure out where you are, where you want to go, and then you work with program management and project management to figure out the best way to actually implement it. a lot of common sense there. Another major aspect of the standard is capability-based planning, and you see this interwoven in all of the phases of the ADM. Capability-based planning builds on the idea that you have several capabilities that span organizational boundaries and process boundaries. For example, your data management capability, as a people dimension, process dimension, material dimension. You can come up with many different dimensions of each capability in your organization. And we want to reason or plan where are we currently, what is the current level of capability, what is the current increment, and what is the next increment going to look like with respect to each of these dimensions. And these nice little spidery plots that you see here at the bottom right, which says how each capability dimension grows in each of the increments. In practice, we see that this works very nicely. It's a very powerful tool to talk to top management, also middle management and operations about how we are going to develop capabilities such as security architectures or data management capabilities. And I personally use this a lot in pretty much every assignment that I do. I think that's enough on TOGAF for now, so let's dive into ArchiMate. ArchiMate is an enterprise architecture modeling language. It was developed in the Netherlands into 2002-2003, and since it's enterprise architecture modeling language, you wanted to have several capabilities. On the one hand, one thing we wanted to be able to do is high-level modeling within a domain. So the business domain, the process domain, the product domain, but also in the IT realm, the application domain or the infrastructure domain. Not only that, but we also wanted to be able to do high-level modeling between the domains. So how does my process domain align with my IT domain, and how does that align with my infrastructure domain? That's what we call modeling between domains. Now, if we are heavily in doing this modeling, then you want to actually use all those models that you build as much as possible. So we need ArchiMate language as a basis for visualizations for various stakeholders. Architecture remains to be a communications game, in my opinion. So not only visualizations, but often preceding the visualization we want it to be used for analyses. So for example, what is the degree of automation of a certain process, or how often is a specific bit of information used in various processes, or how many customer data stores do I have in my organization, right? That sort of analysis should be able to be done with ArchiMate as a language. It was developed in the Netherlands. BizDesign Architect was the first native tool support for ArchiMate, and right now you see that there are many different tools available. Many of them are certified by the Open Group. So if you want to use tooling and you're interested to know more, please get in touch with me, and I might be able to help you there as well. So in TOGAF we saw that there was also this language part, right? The content framework. How does it align with ArchiMate? Here we see the two graphics for the two standards side by side. On the left is the TOGAF crop circle, the ADM crop circle. That's what it's often called. On the right we see a high-level overview of the ArchiMate framework. The business application layer and technology layer is what we call the ArchiMate core, and it's nicely with phases B, C, and D of the ADM. Business architecture, information systems architecture, and technology architecture. But if you support your entire change cycle or architecture development cycle with a modeling language, you need a lot more. The early phases, right, preliminary phase, vision, but also the requirements management phase, we want to talk about stakeholders, their concerns, goals, requirements, drivers, and so forth, and so on. And this is why we developed the motivation extension. Later on, when we've developed the baseline and target architectures, you want to talk about actual change projects and deliverables that they're going to produce, and this is where the implementation and migration extension comes in. So with a frame as a background, we're able to cover the entire change cycle. Very briefly look at what's in there. Here we see the three layers again of ArchiMate core with various concepts. For example, the business layer we see processes, internal behavior of the organization, and services that we as customers of the organization can use. We also see information modeled on the top left with business objects. We also see their data counterparts in the application layer, modeled as data objects. This allows us to talk about customer information in the context of a process versus customer data, various versions of customer data as they are stored in various applications. And this trick is being copied also to the technology layer, where we have artifacts that sit somewhere in the network on nodes. So rather than seeing information as a single concept, we recognize in ArchiMate that you need to distinguish between information in the context of the process where they are used, the data as in the systems where they are managed, and the artifacts, the actual databases, flat files, tuples, and so forth and so on. That's the way this in the infrastructure. Well, I'll very briefly skim over the motivation and implementation and migration extension. They align to provide you with an integral model of stakeholders, their drivers and goals and requirements, and the way they are realized by our architecture. And at the bottom we see the plateau planning with the gaps between plateaus that we want to implement using our projects. How does it work? Right. The idea is to start with a baseline model of your architecture and using the concerns of stakeholders and drivers and requirements, such as let's build a strong data management capability to develop your target architecture. You figure what's the gap between the two, and then you actually implement them. All this can be done using the same modeling language. I know quick, I know that's a lot, but I think it's all enough for a crash course in TOGAF and ArchiMate to set the scene for what we want to talk about, and that's how you can use TOGAF and ArchiMate as an instrument to build a strong data management capability. So let's go. If you look at the field of data management, then you can quickly see that there are a vast amount of frameworks and approaches, tools, methods, methodologies. Some of them are vendor dependent, others are more open. Just to say that there's a lot out there. The main bodies of work is the data management, the work that the Data Management Association has done. They've produced the DMBOK, Data Management Body of Knowledge. I believe we're currently in the process of revising DMBOK. New versions can be expected early next year, is what I've been told. And this is a body of knowledge that brings together many of the various aspects of data management, ranging from master data management and intelligence to more technical things like data security and governance. Right? It provides you with an integral approach to data management. I also believe that it is easy to align with many of the open group standards for EA, such as TOGAF and ArchiMate, as we'll see shortly. Now, if you want to figure out how do EA as a framework and data management as a business goal, how do these two align? I found a very nice quote from Entity, the organization Entity, in the white paper Why MDM Projects Fail and What This Means for Big Data. And they claim that master data management programs cause change, and if you want to be successful in handling that change, you should map out the entire organization, right? Process, data, organization, and so forth and so on. And as we saw in the brief crash course of ArchiMate, that's actually one of the key strong points of ArchiMate, by providing you with that holistic approach of your entire enterprise. So how you make that work? Right, the first thing, and luckily we see that a lot, is that data management is increasingly seen as something that is business driven. Right, the examples that we saw earlier on, sure there are technical problems, but the underlying problems are very much business oriented. We want to serve the customer as well as we can, as efficiently as we can, and therefore we need high quality data and analytics. We also saw that TOGAF's ADM provides you with a approach for building enterprise-wide capability, such as data management. Now, there's a small warning that I want to give you here. If you look at the ADM, it is often seen as something that is big and heavy and top-down and will take a long time to implement. This need not be true. I've seen very strong ADM implementations which use a let's let's aim for the biggest bang for the buck approach, right? Because success sells. The ADM is a very powerful tool, and you can make very lightweight versions of it to get your biggest bang for the buck. So success sells. Keep that in mind also when you build your data management capability. Now to work, of course, the integral models of the entire organization for governance, master data management, BI, metadata data, and so forth are key to success in my opinion. And I'll show you how that can be done. First of all, as mentioned a few times, TOGAF provides you with a structured method for effectively realizing a business vision across the enterprise, business and IT, everyone involved, everyone on board. Capability-based planning. The little graphic here is from my current assignment. The blue line was the initial level of capability. The red line is the desired level of capability, and this is what we're trying to implement. Capability-based planning is a key ingredient for successful enterprise-wide change. Dimension of the MBOK elements, which we'll see shortly, they're very nicely on the various aspects of the data management capability framework. Right? Those elements are organization and culture, the activities that we perform in the organization, deliverables, roles, responsibilities, practices and techniques, and technology. No, technology is just one of the aspects of the entire capability. Also, the more soft aspects are absolutely integral part of capability-based planning. Right? Soft being organizational culture. And last but not least, we believe that ArchiMate is the language of choice for enterprise-wide modeling, especially for building a strong data management capability. So let's use some examples. For example, let's start with data governance. It may not look like it, but the model or the little diagram on the right is actually ArchiMate, just with a slightly different visualization. Often people come to me and say, you know, those ArchiMate concepts, they look intimidating, they're too tech-oriented, I won't be able to talk to my business stakeholders using such complicated graphics. And in my opinion, it's just not true. ArchiMate provides you with a default visualization for all the concepts, and you're free to change them by using different viewpoints. And what we've done here is to develop just such a viewpoint. So data governance is an integral enterprise-wide capability, which is absolutely key to success. This was the outcome also of the expert panel at the last MDM Data Governance Summit in the UK. If you want to do anything with data management, with a strong governance function, preferably very much top-down with business leadership involved. The role of data stewards is crucial, and that's also a starting point for modeling here. We've modeled data stewards using the concept of a business role. Here we see, for example, business roles together. They join in the data council, and here that's modeled as a business collaboration. So the data council underneath is the business collaboration. Steward is responsible in this case for an information area, such as claim, transaction, and staff. So we choose the classic information area approach to stewardship, whereas Anski from SAS, for example, came up with 5 or 6 different ways of organizing your stewardship, and you're able to model all of them with ArchiMate. So we just chose the classic example here. Those information areas, by the way, are modeled using the business object concept. So here we see how you can model governance, at least who is responsible for which information area. But of course, more to it than that. So we've decomposed the information area into key entities. On the top we see the customer information area and its decomposition into entities with specializations. We also see how the customer business object, which is a key entity, is realized 3 times in the application landscape. So the customer entity is realized by data object for international customers, for individual customers, and for corporate customers. Those 3 are data objects, and they're modeled by 2 different systems, ISIS and CSIS. Let's go on. Look at master data management. Right? Many nations juggle with disparate administrations of key entities, either because we bought various systems in the past due to mergers and acquisitions, because someone developed a web app and decided to build their own administration. It has grown organically into what it is today. We're often faced with a challenge of providing an integral vision of who the customer is or which products we offer. It's another typical example, and that's where MDM comes in. A major discipline, and a lot can be said about it. Whole books have been written about it. But one of the things that you want to do from an enterprise perspective, at least, figure out if I'm going to build a golden record, here visualized with a little crown on the top right corner of my customer data object, then how did it came into existence? So which attributes or which fields from the various data objects are used to form that customer object, golden record. We used the data objects with sub-data objects to model the various fields of the data object, and we used a specialized version of the aggregation relation to say customer golden record is being built from fields from the various constituent regular data objects. Of course, you also want to model the logical data manipulations using the application function concepts, but that's beyond the scope of this presentation. I just wanted to be able to show my customer entity on the top in pink is realized now by 4 data objects, one of them being the golden record, and how that is built up from the 3 other data objects. Let's look at BI and data warehousing then. This is also an area of data management that is gaining increasing popularity. I see organizations quickly building a strong analytical capability to support their strategic team to get out of the current economic mess. I guess that's a good initiative. We also see, of course, more longer-running initiatives to build data warehouses. We also see a lot being done about using big data in your intelligence function. So this is something that is getting a lot of business attention these days. So from a modeling perspective, what are the things that we want to model? On the one, we want to be able to model the data flow through your application landscape into your BI systems. The BI systems here are represented as application components, the little bar chart in the top right corner. So the Enterprise Data Warehouse, EDW, and the various data marts and analytical workspace are profiled so you visually recognize them as being BI systems. And you also want to be able to model the BI reports and information that you generate using these systems. So here you see the data flow from, at the bottom, from CSys and information sys into an MDM hub. We see which is using the crown again to show that this is where mastering takes place. The golden records are being stored there. We see how data flow from this MDM hub flows into the ERP package as well as into the EDW, your data warehouse. We also see the data flow into analytical spaces and data marts and how you create all your reports and dashboards. I can't overstress the importance of having this sort of lineage information in place in your organization. One of my recent assignments was in a governmental organization here in the Netherlands, and I almost made the newspapers because various reports were not trusted. The data on those reports was not trusted, and by following the lineage, which was not always all that clear, from data mart all the way back to the source systems, we were able to prove that the data that we published was actually correct. So we avoided a big newspaper publication. So being able to model that sort of flow through your application landscape is very important from an enterprise perspective and from a data quality perspective. The next that I want to talk about very briefly is another major area, and that's metadata management. Now, metadata is often defined as data about data, and I guess that's sort of true, but in that case pretty much everything is metadata. right? Who's responsible for a bit of information? Which steward, for example? What are the definitions of key terms? How is it organized in IT? Who uses it? Who manipulates it? All that sort of stuff. That's all metadata. We typically make a distinction between business metadata and technical metadata. Now, ArchiMate is quite a flexible language. You have concepts such as business role and business process and application component. Relations between those various concepts. We see here the realization relation and a profiled version of the application relation. And by making a big model, basically what you're doing is creating metadata. Not only that, most ArchiMate tooling allows you to put in quite a bit of documentation with each of the concepts. For example, customer object, we see here as a business entity, you're able to type in the comment box the definition of what we mean by customer. Each of the attributes, also modeled here as business objects, visualized attributes, you're able to provide the definition of what is first name, what is last name, how do we determine date of birth, and so forth, and so on. But all those definitions are in the documentation. And then tools also allow you to create properties. So if you want to say, for example, customer information is obtained from such and such a third party, that sort of properties can be modeled using properties in most ArchiMate tools. So let's look at the diagram briefly. What do we see here? We see customer steward, which was a business role, who is responsible for the customer entity with its attributes. See that the customer entity has to realize several business requirements, mostly about completeness, correctness, and time. So basically your non-functionals, your quality rules. We see the related business functions that manipulate or use the customer entity. And we see how the customer entity is realized by data objects, which are used to build a golden record called customer at the bottom. So integral modeling of all sorts of metadata management across your landscape. So does this leave us? If you integrate those little snippets that are created in the last few slides, you get the big picture that you see here. And let's start at the top left. At the top we see the Data Council, which was a business collaboration, with business stewards that participate in the council, their business roles, and the nation areas that each steward is responsible for. Then, a little more to the right, we see how an information area can be decomposed into key entities, modeled with business objects. And as we saw before, you can decompose those business objects further into attributes. So, which entity has which attribute. One of the strong points of ArchiMate, as mentioned a few times, is that we can also visually model how one entity is realized by various data objects and how they are managed by various T systems. Here we used graphical nesting to show that the international customer data object is managed by the ISIS system, whereas the individual and corporate customer data objects are managed by the CSIS system. Then there's of course the customer golden record at the bottom. Oops, I misclicked. There we go. And this is where we model our mastering. Right, as mentioned before, in practice you want to show how data cleaning, how a verification of your incoming data stream, how manipulation of that stream into forming your golden record, how that is handled. That's all done by using application functions inside your MDM hub. That's also beyond the scope of today's presentation. So if you want to know more about that, drop me a note and I'll give you some examples. By mastering your data objects in the MDM environment is also an integral part of your overall picture. And last but not least, we're able to model the data movement from various data sources into a data warehouse and onwards into all sorts of smart analytical workspaces and whatnot to provide us with the analytics and reports and dashboards and what have you to stay in control of our enterprise. The big picture. I've used diagrams like this in practice, and as I said before, this is just a different visualization of core ArchiMate concepts, and I can prove it. You see the same model or the same view twice. On the left, we see the pure ArchiMate concepts or the default ArchiMate concepts and the way you find them in the standard, with a data council modeled as a collaboration with two wedding rings. We see the roles modeled as a toilet roll, I guess. We see, well, the main regular ArchiMate concepts. On the top right, we see the nicer ArchiMate visualization that we've used successfully with various customers to talk about we've organized the data management capability. So why the two visualization styles? Well, we chose to use ArchiMate as our modeling language of choice because of the fact that it's a formal modeling language that allows us to do both analysis and visualizations. So using this modeling language and our tool support, we're able to do all those analyses that I talked about. So if we have a customer entity, how often do we have copies of the entity in our data stores? How does information flow through the landscape? If I have a report here, what was the lineage of the data that goes onto that report, and so forth and so on. Key strength of ArchiMate, but still you want to talk about all this stuff with your key stakeholders and being able to generate, well, let's just call it for what they are, pretty pictures will help you in doing so successfully. So that's all of our problem, right? We started with several business problems that we come across in practice. Let's revisit them briefly. Right? One of them was we do not have a single unified view of our customer or our products. Well, this is the realm of master data management and helps organizations to define a single unified view of your entities. And as saw earlier, you can use ArchiMate to visualize how your key entities are modeled in your landscape, and how the fields of those data objects are being used to generate your golden record. So this is absolutely part of your major enterprise model. The other one was delivering answers to intelligence questions takes several days, and we need the answers today. So the need for agility and speed. Alignment with business and strong data governance. If you have a good governance function and you are to grips with the complexity of your application landscape, then often you're able to answer questions quicker because you know which data is where. And even if you can't get it in the preferred way, for example, through services or your MDM hub or your data warehouse, you still know where the data is, so you might be able to just build a quick and dirty solution to answer the question now and build a more long-term solution later. The quality of the data, whether it's intelligence data or production data, right? We have seen issues in the past. Well, if you have a good grip on your data management, in terms of what data goes where is it manipulated and where is it used, if you have strong governance on who is allowed to use which data, who is allowed to modify it, and so forth and so on, then you build trust. And trust go a long way. I have some interesting examples of that if you want to have them. Last but not least, the example was tracing customer complaints, late orders, and so forth and so on. It's just another example of what we've seen so far. If you can get to grips with the complexity of your data fundament, your landscape, your IT, your processes, then you'll be able to handle them more quickly and more effectively. So what key takeaway of today's presentation? First of all, I believe that organizations are increasingly dependent on high quality data and information to run the business. There's no other way about it. If you don't have quality data, then I don't think you will be in business much longer. So data management is a business issue, and it's here to stay. The second takeaway is that data management is not a project but a continuous process. If you want to do this, you should get in charge, you should get into control, and building a capability to measure data is going to take you a while. This is where Dash that I started with earlier comes into place. Right? Find the place where you can get the biggest bang for a buck, and grow from there. You might want to use capability-based planning to figure out where you can get the biggest bang for your buck, but you should also keep the big picture in mind. You should know where eventually you want to grow towards. And please keep in mind that planning is essential, but plans tend to be very useless, as Eisenhower said. Keep your eye on the ball, but grow incrementally is what I always say. But not least, I believe that a integral, holistic model of enterprise with a strong focus on which information is used where and how is it manifested in your application landscape, modeled using ArchiMate, preferably using BizDesign Architect as a tool, can help you to get in control. Let's into some useful resources. I've listed a few. First of all, I want to point out again the excellent work that the Data Management Association is doing. DEMA is an international organization. They have many local chapters, so if you want to know more about data management, this is a very good place to start. I've also included here some links to the Data Governance Institute, the MDM Institute, and the Institute for Metadata Management, and you can find a lot of topic-specific information on their respective websites. A lot of good stuff is there. They also organize several excellent conferences and webinars, so please have a look at those websites. Last but not least, some useful resources from BizDesign and the Open Group. Let's start with the Open Group. Downloadable versions of the full specs of ArchiMate and TOGAF are available online, the website of the Open Group. You can also find a wide range of webinars and white papers there that will help you get started, or even some more advanced topics. There's a lot of good information there. So I'd like to point you to our blog, blog.bizdesign.com. We have a useful series of articles on architecture, and we've started a blog series on building a strong data management capability with TOGAF and ArchiMate. The first posting in this series was done yesterday, and we expect to host that series over the next 10 weeks or so. So if you want to know more, that's a very good place to start. Not least, if you're interested in training, have a look at the website of our academy. And if you want to play with Architect, our ArchiMate tool, you can download a trial from the website. Last, if you want to obtain a copy of the slides I used today, have a look at bizdesign.com/downloads. Under webinars, you'll find the announcement for today's webinar, as well as a copy of the slides. And that wraps it up for me, and I think there are some questions. Simon, over to you.
That's great. Many thanks. We've had quite a few requests for the slides. Baz, do you think you could just quickly put that slide up so people can see that URL and write it down?
Yes, of course. There you go. So the URL is www.bizdesign.com/downloads. I think you should be able to see it now.
Fantastic. Thank you, Baz. So everyone, if you want a copy of Baz's slides, you can go to that URL and download the slides there. And of course, if you have any difficulties, you can always send an email to myself and I'll assist you if I can. So Baz, we have a few questions on the QA facility, so let me just work our way through these for you. I'll start on the first question from Ether, asking, why does the data capability require the mapping of the entire enterprise? Can it be done through transitions, the finest grain of architecture partition, working upwards to the organizational level?
That's an excellent question, and I think I missed the name. Whoever asked the question, you're absolutely right. So one of the things that we often see is people want to build a big bang enterprise-wide data management capability. Now, while that sounds like a good idea, I mentioned that it's often a good idea to start small, show business value to gain some traction. Sure, if you come up with one domain, let's say the customer domain or the product domain or any domain that you can think of, but then for that little domain you should be able to, the point I was trying to make is that for that domain you should model not only the information and its data counterparts, but also the processes where the information is used, the people and the roles and the organizational unit that use or manage or manipulate the information, the IT surrounding it, right? So for that little domain, create a holistic model if you want to be in control. So you can start small, but that integral modeling with thinking in the back of your mind.
Next question. As I recall, there is no abstraction for capability in ArchiMate. How capability is mapped into ArchiMate in your method?
Also very interesting question. I believe this is a topic that is being discussed frequently in the context of the open group. The ArchiMate language itself does not have a concept for capability yet, as I should add. A lot of research is being done in that area. I think we've seen quite a few proposals for how to model capabilities in ArchiMate. There are two schools of thoughts. Some people think that capability maps onto the business function or application function concept. Others believe that would require a new concept for capability and for increment, obviously, and possibly also for capability dimensions, as they're called in TOGAF. We've seen some proposals, and I expect, after a lot of experimentation in the field, that it will eventually come to a vote in the architect forum, and then we might see yet another extension of the ArchiMate language. Earlier on, I showed you the ArchiMate core and the two extensions, implementation and migration extension, and I expect that we will also have a capability-based planning extension. The design is working on one proposal, and saw several excellent presentations on the last few open group conferences about the same topic. So I expect some changes to be made there. I hope that answers your question for now.
And a question here from Alexander asking for some clarification of why you differentiated between customer and international customer.
This was in the example that I showed earlier. Basically, the idea was to show that the customer entity, the thing that we want to talk about in a business context, may have various manifestations in IT. And I just made up an example. So in this case, it seemed to make sense to have one system where we manage all our international customers, maybe because we purchased some company abroad, and one system that has all our local customers, which are further partitioned into individuals and corporate customers. So just an example of something that I made up to be able to show you that we have various manifestations of one entity into our IT systems.
A question here from Joseph, asking for some clarification around the relationship of modeling languages such as UML and BPMN. What's the relationship of those modeling languages and ArchiMate? Are they compatible, or are they just a subset of each other?
Okay, that is also a very good question. So earlier I mentioned that ArchiMate tends to be used at the enterprise level or at the architecture level, so to speak. So it's used for modeling, high-level modeling within a domain and across domains, as we discussed. There are many different languages out there, such as BPMN, but also, for example, entity relationship diagrams, or object role modeling, or various other data modeling schemes, more at the design level, so to speak. So do they align? Well, typically what we see is we create enterprise architecture models using ArchiMate. Later on, when we dive into design, you use more specialized languages such as BPMN for your processes, or entity relationship diagram for your data, or maybe Visio for your infrastructure models. Right, Visio has some really cool stuff there. It seems to be very popular in that area. And ideally, you will of course link between all those different models. Right, so you'll be able to show this process as it was modeled in my architecture model can be decomposed into this BPMN diagram. Now, using most tool suites, including the BizDesign one, or for example the IBM one, you're able to do this sort of drill down from the EA level down into your BPMN or ERD or even for rule model So that's how they align. I think they're very much compatible, and the various tools handle those differences or those alignments in different ways.
From Brian asking, what are the key elements of your approach to help data stewards do their work? And he says especially new data stewards.
Well, data stewards, in my opinion, are the heroes of data management because those are the guys that actually make everything work. And one thing that I see data stewards struggle with is to figure out who is responsible for what. Right. Not only that, they also, of course, have a lot of more detailed operational work to handle. We see, for example, technical data stewards who are responsible for cleaning and data quality, measurement and seeing all that sort of stuff. Whereas business data stewards have a more, let's say, policy-oriented task. I believe that the elements of capability-based planning, which will give the steward a clear idea of where we are and where we want to move to, as well as the holistic modeling of your business information and data objects, will give them the grip that they need to be able to do their work effectively. There's also another thought bubbling up. One of the key issues you see often is the use of standards and policies in the field of data management. ArchiMate such does not have a concept for standard, but we typically use abuse, if you will, the concept of this requirement for standards. And being able to model how your standards are being used in your information landscape is also something that will help the steward.
Thanks. The next question from Ravi is asking about how your approach fits into the TOGAF model. He says, is it part of information architecture or will it fit in technology architecture?
I guess there's either or both, depending on how you look at it. So the way I see it is that many organizations increasingly recognize the fact that data asset that should be managed. Right? It's an asset that you need in order to survive in the current economic landscape. And if you want to manage that, then you should build a data management capability. So in that sense, I guess my answer would be it's across all three domains because we developed this vision of how we want to be in control of our data, which is phase A of the ADM, and then using both the business aspect, which is where, for example, stewardship plays an important role, the business information and information systems aspect, for example, for MDM and for business intelligence and data flow and all that sort of stuff that we talked about. And the infrastructure part comes into play if we talk about which tools are we going to use and how are they going to be put into a network effectively and so on. So I guess it touches on all three of those domains. Then, of course, using the rest of the ADM, if you have a solid vision, you can use the ADM to actually implement it.
Fantastic. Well, I'm looking at the time. I think it's coming to the end of the hour, so I think this would be a good time to end today's event. I'd like to thank everyone for their time to participate, and I'd certainly like to thank you for your time to give your presentation. Is there any last words you'd like to say before I close the event, Baz?
Yeah, absolutely. I hope you found today's presentation inspiring. I know it was a lot of information, and some of it was rather high level. There's a lot more to it, and I hope you'll be able to use this in practice. And if you have any good war stories to share with me, do touch. I'm always looking for good stories and new ideas. So I'm looking forward to hear from you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And everyone, if there's any questions that we haven't managed to get through, please don't hesitate to email them to us and we will deal with those offline. So Baz, once again, thank you very much, and thank you everyone for participating. Goodbye.